set it up. Not yet. Okay, wait, 3, 2, 1, and now we're live.
Yes. Okay. Good afternoon to our distinguished panelists and valued attendees. And let me, on behalf of my colleagues and the Global Leader Initiative, warmly welcome you to the first edition of a series of conversations that we most likely will be holding on a range of issues and interests to young people around the world. So once again, I'd like to thank you all for attending, well, virtually attending and being a part of what is now a very important and topical conversation. So as young people and this generation, we have the novel coronavirus or COVID-19 pandemic, which has plunged us into an unprecedented reality, which has characterized a phenomenal rate of infections of over maybe 12 million and a fatality of over 500,000, with massive disruption in lives and livelihoods. And today our topic would be the topic of the new normal from the world youth perspective. So since no one really imagined like how the COVID-19 outbreak and the effects of what it had, new protocols and concepts have been put in place which are continually defining our meal and mindset in today's reality. So we would like to start our discussion. Sorry. Okay. So we have. Let me introduce myself. I'm so sorry. My name is Dèsirèe Kpukumu. I am a master's student at the National Economics University, and today I will be your moderator, and I'll be introducing you to a well-educated and highly experienced panel who are also involved in the discussion of many global issues. So we'll start with our first panelist, who is Kniepkamp. He's a German national with a BA in Law and Management from the University of Bielefeld. He's currently a research assistant of the German Federal Parliament, working alongside the Dr. Christian Jong. And we also have with us Oscar Scoppa, an Italian national who studied liberal arts at the Leiden University College in The Hague and international relations and diplomacy at the Anglo-American University in Prague. He's currently a property manager for Domus Ultrium and a junior project manager at the Italian Chamber of Commerce. He was also president of the Diplomatic Debate Club of the Anglo-American University. And we have with us also Muhammad Ali Bokhari. He's a legal practitioner who works for the Burke Hall Blackburn law firm in Manchester, United Kingdom. He has an LLB honors from the Manchester Metropolitan University and currently pursuing his master's in business and management law at the University of Law. And lastly, we have Aidil Pananrang, Indonesian national who completed his bachelor's in engineering at the Telecommunication Engineering Telecom University in Bandung, Indonesia. He currently works as the Chief Executive Officer at PT Janer Arsa Mandiri, and he's currently pursuing his master's in engineering at the Electrical Engineering specializing in communication management. Today, our debate, we have 3 key questions that we'd like to speak on. And firstly, we'll start with the question being, how has COVID-19 affected you personally? And from your point of view, how has it affected your country? And I'd like to start with Tim, please. Anyone?
Yes, of course. So obviously I'm speaking about my personal perspective and the perspective of my home country, which in this case is Germany. I can say on a personal level that I've been affected, in fact, quite positively because the COVID pandemic gave me more time to do sports. I had a better sleeping rhythm. So overall, I was very fortunate in those unlike circumstances to actually not have any negative outcome of it. But when we face the component we are having as a country, obviously we are having a huge financial and economical backlash that we are currently facing as a consequence of the crisis. It is still not possible to actually estimate the entire consequences we are facing. But as within the European Union, first estimations by the European Commission already indicate that we have a negative growth of the economic by about 7%, if I'm not mistaken. That's at least the last ones I've seen. Also, as of right now, Germany is affected with about 200,000 cases of COVID-19, of whom only, and that's the positive part, 9,000 have been deadly. About 185,000 people have recovered already. And we have a daily rate of about 300 to 400 people, which are newly infected. So overall, the consequences are severe, yes, but we would say that we handle currently fairly well, given the circumstances we see, in particular in comparison to countries as Brazil or the United States of America.
Mohammed, would you like to go on? Mohammed?
It's my turn, okay. So it has, in a way, not affected me like I've been healthy over this time. So it hasn't really affected me health-wise, fortunately, so that's a good sign. However, because I'm doing a master's, it's all gone remote. So I've had exams which have gone online, which is a new thing, because you're used to doing exams in an exam hall, but we've had to do it online. I've been also working in a law firm, and I've had to you get used to working remotely by working at home, which is again a new thing. And I feel with the current situation the way it is, it's a new thing which will be quite normal for coming years now. So personally, yes, it has affected me in terms of my university, in terms of my work. It has also affected because I like to travel. It's affected the fact that I cannot travel now. And I was in Pakistan back in December. That was the last time I traveled, really. And it's been over 6 months, and with the current situation, I don't think I'll be traveling anytime soon in the next few months. Especially this summer, I don't expect to travel. So that has changed since this new coronavirus thing. And how it's affected, well, I live in the UK, so I'll start with the UK. It has affected in a way that we've had one of the worst hit countries in the world. And we get examples of other countries like Germany who've handled really well. We've had over 300,000 cases, around 300,000 cases, almost 300,000 cases. We've had over 44,000 deaths, unfortunately. And again, coming back to Pakistan, it's been the same. It's been over 250,000 cases, and the deaths have been a bit lower, about 5,000. That's a bit lower, but again, there's criticism saying that it might not be the accurate figure. The accurate figure might be a bit higher than the normal one. So yes, it has affected. Jobs have been affected as well. People have lost jobs, unfortunately, with the current situation. Like an economic situation is really bad in both the UK and Pakistan, that it has affected people's work. And a lot of people at the moment, even now, they don't know when they will return to work. So it has had a deadly economic effect. But on a personal note, I think there's things which have been very good. For example, I've started running outside, which wasn't a normal thing back when we didn't have COVID, because the gyms are closed. So I've had to get used to running outside. And this has been a good, healthy, new thing, I think. So yeah, in a way, that's how it's affected me personally and the country itself.
Okay. Oscar?
Me?
Oscar? Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, even though I'm Italian and I was born there, I'm still half Czech, and I live in the Czech Republic at this point. So what I will be talking mostly is about how the situation was held here in the Czech Republic, even though I can say some minor things about Italy as well. But I was affected by the coronavirus majorly as the university closed and I was finishing my bachelor degree. And though even if it closed from one day to the other, the university was fast enough to move everything online immediately. So this gave me as well a bit of luck in this unlucky situation where I had more time to finish my bachelor thesis, prepare for the state exams. And as Tim and Mohammed, I also could do some more sport and things I was postponing. But apart from this, I was affected, of course, by the measures which were implemented immediately in the Czech Republic, which was the first country, if I'm not mistaken, to making mandatory the face masks. Also, the quarantine here was implemented immediately, and shops were closed. But what I can say from my personal experience is that at the end of the day, even though everyone stayed at home mostly, people still continue to go for walks to the parks. On the other hand, in Italy, people could not even leave their own village, barely could go to the supermarkets. Everyone had to have a paper with self-identification of who is the person and whether it has any connection with anyone who was sick of coronavirus. So also because Italy was hit much harder. At the beginning, it was one of the first of European countries which was hit that hard, not only because it was the first though, but also because it has the oldest European population. And on the other hand, the Czech Republic was hit much less. But still, I believe there will be long-lasting consequences, especially as Tim spoke about on the job market or on the economy overall. And this because the Czech economy is fully almost dependent on the German one. So as far as if the German economy will start to decrease its economic output and it will be slowing down, the Czech economy will be also touched a lot by this. Another aspect, for example, which will be felt a lot in many European countries as well, is tourism. Tourism is one of the hardest hit sectors. And as Prague, for example, is very economically dependent, I mean, to a certain point, tourism, and as well, these are also questions of that. So, but otherwise, if I can say the numbers, Italy was hit also very hard at the beginning. Now it has less than Britain, though, of the total cases, around 240,000, and Czech Republic only about 13,000. So that's it for this point.
Thank you very much, Aidil.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, just like other countries in general, Indonesia was greatly affected by this COVID-19. But not to mention that Indonesia has around 267 million population, the biggest port, if I'm not mistaken, in the world. So yeah, it's quite hard in here. The cases number reached 74,000 approximately. And from that number, half of it already recovered, but we got like 3,000 something death toll in this case. But what I'm really concerning is about the employment rate itself. Since in Indonesia, after the COVID hit, we got around 3 million people lost their jobs. And matter of fact, from Indonesia Chamber of Commerce have another data that say it reached 6 million of people that lost their jobs. So of course it has a lot of impact to the other aspect, such as the economic. For the first time, the Indonesian economic growth has negative numbers. For example, normally it will be 5% until 6% quarterly, but right now it's around -3%. So it's really bad. But we are hoping things to get better. And what for me, actually, we learn from home since we are still in college too. but since Indonesia is very wide country, like there's a huge inequality also. Like people in big cities easily to get access to the education through the internet, but we still got a lot of work to do for those people in the rural areas. But in the future, we hope things will get better. I guess that's it.
Thank you all for your perspective. And as we can see, COVID-19 has yet to be with us, and like it has affected us all in terms of travel, economies, and jobs, especially the youth when it comes to traveling aspects. On to the next question. Sorry. How is the new normal situation in your country? And have you noticed any type of change in the habits of the people? And like, have you also noticed like the change in the case numbers, or have you not been paying attention to the change in the case numbers? Um, I don't, Aidil, Oscar, anybody?
I can start.
Yes, sure.
So the new normal, well, it's a very very well-known word now, the new normal. Things have started to become normal in the UK, for example, as the restaurants open on the 4th of July. The gyms will open soon in a couple of weeks. And we follow this 2 meter distance rule, which is, I wouldn't say it's being strictly followed everywhere, because some places it's difficult to follow that. And now there's a 1 meter rule as well. So for example, for like restaurants and some shops where it's difficult to have 2 meter, to keep people 2 meter apart because of like how their business is constrained. There's a 1 meter rule. So if you can't follow 2 meter rule, it has to be 1 meter rule, which again, it's you can't always see when you are in the city center that it's being followed, because on weekends, of course, people all rush to the city centers and we see a large number of people there. So it's open just now, so we don't know how badly it will affect. Will the cases go up or not? Because, for example, in a town called Leicester, it's actually gone into lockdown because they were having coronavirus tests, and 2% in the UK normally get positive. In Leicester, they were 10%, so they had to lock it down. So it's like they're gonna be trying to do some regional lockdowns. So like if they see some other cities having a higher rate of positive tests, they will lock that part of basically the country, not the whole country itself, because as you know, the economy needs to start working. So the new normal basically means that if you can work from home, work from home. If you can't, then you can go to work. So like a lot of hospitality and restaurants and shops are open now, so people can work. A lot of students work there when they do their undergrad degree or master's degree, and they work in different places. So they do that as well. So that's affecting them. And then also that if you can work from home, we have to wear face masks in public transport now. That it's not very normal to wear face masks in the UK. Even when it was at speak, people would avoid wearing face masks. But if you're on public transport, you have to wear face masks now. So that's a new change. But again, it's not being enforced very strictly. In Pakistan, the schools have closed, the universities have closed, and they're not opening until September, which again is a new normal. If people can work from home, they are working from home, but a lot of people are traveling like normal, and the cases are rising every day, which is a bit risky because, as Aidil was saying, Indonesia is the fourth largest country. Pakistan is actually fifth largest in terms of population, and the cases are around 250,000 now, and they're rising every day at the rate of around 3,000 to 4,000 every day. So again, everyone says it might not be the accurate figure, it might be more than that. So it has changed a lot. It's difficult to say how long will this continue. But at the moment, I think the new normal has become that you have meetings online now. So like we are having one online now. So this is the new normal. People have followed in the UK, for example, they have followed the rules to some extent, but then there have been people who have not really followed. So that's why in some regions, the rate has gone up. So it's difficult to say at this stage how it's affected the whole country, but there have been positive signs, been able to control it to some extent, but there's still a lot of work to be done before we can say if it's been successful. But personally, I've not really enjoyed the new normal because I feel that I like being more in person rather than virtual, because the new normal is now virtual meetings, virtual lectures, virtual classrooms, which I'm not a big fan of. I just feel in person you get better understanding of different things and you learn better. Um, you gain a lot more if it's in person rather than virtual. So I think that's what at the moment that's what we have to. But unfortunately, that's the position we are in. But hopefully, it will change and we can have back to normal, and not the new normal.
Thank you. Tim?
Yeah, sure. So the term the new normal is also increasingly used here among the country and among the population. What I sense is a more apparent understanding when it comes to germs on public things. People tend nowadays not to touch everything within the public transport sector, which in the past none of people here cared about. And obviously the mask situation is the same as it applies to the UK, and also see some parallels when it comes to the, let's say, the way the 2 meter or 1.5 meter it is here distance is kept, or the way the government is approaching it in terms of how strict the police is looking for it. While we had in the first place a federal approach, now all of the 16 federal states we have within the country are somehow given the opportunity, or let's say responsibility, to decide on their own measures, which in the first place sounds realistic, to tailor it down to the specific needs. We have the same situation as the UK has with Leicester, that there is one area where there is an increased number of cases, so they lock down the district. But at the same time, it is difficult because Germany is not that big, geographically speaking. And so consequently, when you take a long distance train across the country, it could be that 4 to 5 different settings of rules apply to the way you have to adhere to the pandemic, or the measures against the pandemic. So the consequences that often people are unsure about what they have to adhere to now. And so these days, it could be that the state of Berlin has an entirely different setting than it has the state of Hamburg. So the new back to normal is linked to a lot of confusion amongst society. What I see at the same time is that people, obviously, as it is within the UK, have not necessarily a right, but generally they do more home office. There is currently a legislative approach to think about having a right for home office as long as the pandemic is still ongoing, but that is to be debated, so it's not fixed as of now. People use more contactless cards when it comes to the paying. So we try to avoid whatever contact, but yet at the same time, especially in light of the Black Lives Matter movement, there have been huge demonstrations with about 10, 15, in some cases even 20,000 people coming together with no distance, barely wearing any masks. And so what I personally sense here is that the society is very ambitious about the way it is approaching. At the same time, some people are saying it is super important that we keep distance. At the same people 2 weeks later go to demonstrations and obviously act carelessly. So that is a bit frustrating, considering the especially constitutional rights we have not lost, but definitely bifurcated during the last couple of months. When you look at the freedom of movement, for instance, which is a highly important constitutional right, we've obviously shortened it, but yet people think it is important to run around the cities with 10,000 people. Because, and that's important to add at that point, the right of demonstration has been locked down in the meantime, but is now available again, in theory, with 1.5 meters of distance. So what we are facing right now is demonstrations both within the area of the Black Lives Matter movement, and demonstrations which say that we should lift the current lockdown situations. Both of them taking place, especially in the bigger cities like Berlin. So yeah, that's maybe the back normal we face over here.
You made mention of the Black Lives Matter movement. Was it like, so as we saw on the news and heard on social media, it was a pretty big demonstration in the US. So was it like as big as it was in the US, or was it a little bit smaller in size? And the fatalities with like people who contracted the virus, were they plenty or minimal?
So the point is, first of all, when you look at the population, we have about 80 million. I'm not sure how many people live in the US, but I would say about 3 to 4 times as many. So if you link that down, and I couldn't tell the exact numbers we had in the US, I would say for German standards, that's what I can definitely like estimate. It was a big demonstration, or demonstrations, in fact. Not as big as those for climate action we had in 2019, but comparably huge. And the point, and that was where I found personally it a bit ambiguous, was the approach the people took. That the same people who said 3 weeks ago, it is important not to go outside, we should stay inside, super, super, super urgent, were the same people that 3 weeks later said, oh, now it's time for a demonstration with 15K people in the city center. So there are no statistics, unfortunately, on how many cases in Berlin have or could be linked to this incident, but only from estimations you can definitely say when there are 15,000 people, the likelihood that there is someone among them that is infected. And we know these days that the COVID virus is spread by so-called super spreaders. So a small proportion of people is spreading it to a large number of people. You can estimate that among 15,000 people, the likelihood is not that low that there is at least one person who could spread it. And that would mean then that these demonstrations, as important as their topic was, could actually move the country back in the way they fight the COVID crisis.
Thank you very much for your insight. Oscar?
Yes, I'm sorry for sometimes my internet just resets and I have to fix it, but usually in 1 minute it rejoins. So just hope it will not happen now. But I want to say that here initially in the Czech Republic, at least the crisis was perceived in a very chaotic way. Probably everywhere though, the supermarkets of course were rushed. There were not supplies that to that extent as of course countries locked down in the same time. But now it seems to me that people took the opposite side and don't care at all of what is happening, at least many people. And to that is connected a lot to what Tim was saying as well with the demonstrations. But I'm not going into that now. But to the day of today, there is much less restriction here in the Czech Republic, even though we were one of the first European countries to have a total lockdown with face masks and everything. Now it's much less. The masks are only in the metro, mandatory, everything reopened, restaurants, shops. So that's the new normal again. So we are back in the normal. But perhaps what's changed, again, as we already talked about, it is a lot of home office and online education is changing. So the question will be also how education might change in the future, and whether small universities will survive at all. But that's a question we'll see in the future more than now. And as well as Mohammed was talking, here in Czech Republic, they also do the local lockdowns. Just 2 days ago, there was a region not far from Prague where the virus was spreading. So they isolated the region and the masks were again put mandatory. So I think it's the same pretty much all around Europe, as the cooperation as well increased. Initially, countries, I have to say, at least what is known, did not cooperate much. Now we see that the cooperation is essential in a global task like this, of course. And the virus, we need to understand that it will continue to spread until we find a vaccine. And we just need to find a way to try to co-live with this. Until there will be an effective vaccine or herd immunity, perhaps, we'll see. And another point I wanted to bring up is that in the Czech Republic, even though the lockdown was quite harsh. Still, people, as I said, went into parks, and I doubt that. And now, as I see that everything is back to normal, I doubt that it will have any long-term consequences in the human behavior, as humans still remain social beings. People want to go out, and except, of course, the fields of work, school, perhaps tourism as well, as I said previously. And what I would like to say is that what I'm a bit skeptical of is how some governments are increasing their surveillance of their own citizens, even in the West, not only in authoritarian regimes, even in democratic systems. For example, we can bring up, of course, China, Singapore to a certain point, but Israel as well, and other countries. And this is also a point that we should be careful on, to what extent, even though the government wants to do it in a way to help people, to what extent we should allow the government to gather information on all the citizens, because with surveillance, increased surveillance, the government gets much more information on people. And that might be also a point to talk about later.
I think we'll bring that up a bit later to discuss on that more, because I'm intrigued on that actually. Aidil?
Can I add to that point, actually, to the Oscar's point?
Sure.
Sure.
So, like, he's talked about surveillance, but I think it's because of the fact that people have actually not accepted the rules of lockdown, for example, in some countries. In the UK, for example, I would be honest, people have they have followed the rules, but there have been occasions where they haven't. Wearing a face mask, you still get a strange look. People still look at you strangely that you're wearing a face mask, unless you're on a metro now, which it wasn't compulsory before. It's only 15 June got compulsory. So because people have not followed the rules, I think they're trying to make sure that they can control it, because they can't keep the economy closed for about 6 more months. It has to open at some point. You can't keep it closed forever. It has to open at some point. People will have to go outside at some point. Universities will have to open because, for example, UK is a massive market for education. And at the moment, the way things are, the universities in the UK are losing a lot of money because a lot of international students are not coming. Because if they're doing it online, they don't think it's worth paying all the fee they have to pay, which is understandable. But the economy is struggling because the UK does depend a lot on international students coming to study. And because they're not coming from September at the moment, because they're not sure if they're going to do it online or in face learning. So like they're not sure, so they don't think it's worth coming, for example. So at some point you'll have to open. So the government are trying to keep an eye on their citizens just because they want to make sure that this COVID-19 can be controlled. Because at the moment, if it stays like the way it is, we will just be having local lockdowns every other week, and that will create a lot of problems for a lot of people. As we've seen with the unemployment rate in all different countries has gone up. And in the UK, it could go up to 15% if there's a second wave, for example. And 15% is a high number for a country. It could go up from 3.9% to 15%, which is like a high change in like 6 months. So that's really bad. So.
Thank you. Aidil?
Okay. Thank you very much. Actually, the same thing goes in here. At first, people were really scared of, like they really do the new normal protocol, like they always wash their hand, they always keep social distancing. But nowadays, I see people less likely to do that, but most of them still doing it, but it's less. But the government tried their best. They tried to reducing the maximum number of person in a public transportation, and also put strict protocol in every building, in every market, in every coffee shop, in every place they got. But still, again, my main concern is on the education, because the Gini ratio in Indonesia is quite high. So the people in the big cities seems like start to go to the shop, go to the mall, but I don't know how other ways we need to try to make them follow the strict rules. But lately, the case number is still increasing. Is in Indonesia, the number still high. For example, like in the big cities, like in Jakarta and in Makassar, or even in Surabaya, in the East Java, is the most. We call it black zone since it really have a lot of death toll over there. But it seems like in the media we saw every day, like the government do it over and over again, try to remind the people. And I hope soon, since there's a lot of movement right now in Indonesia to fight this COVID. So yeah, I hope things will get better. I think that's it.
Thank you very much. Very interesting perspectives from all of you. Let's move on to the next question, being, in your opinion, what are some initiatives that the government has taken that you would deem necessary, and the ones that you would deem like you would think are not necessary as well? Like, for example, like some initiatives in Ukraine, everyone's supposed to wear face masks regardless of where you're going and or what you're doing. So, do you think something like that is necessary or not? Um, Anybody?
I can start again.
Please go ahead.
So so yeah, the government has faced a lot of criticism here actually, because we're in the middle of leaving the EU as well, in the UK, for example, which Tim will be very aware of, as obviously Germany is part of EU. But yeah, I think because it is basically we were leaving the EU and it's overshadowed it completely, this COVID-19 now. It happened 31st January, we left the EU, for example. But because of COVID-19, everything has just taken a backseat. So the government has faced criticism from the start, because there was a push that the government should announce lockdown early, because the cases were rising early, end of February, March, they were rising. But the football matches were going on. The government said you can go out to restaurants, you can go out to sports events, you can go out to everything, and you can shake hands with people as well. Middle of March, when WHO was saying that you should be careful, the government here was saying you can go do whatever you want. And the cases were rising really fast at that time. So it did face a lot of criticism. The face mask was never mandatory. We were actually discouraged from wearing face masks back in March, April, and May, because they needed a face mask for the National Health Service, which is the NHS, which is the health service here. And because they have been short of face masks, because the government didn't prepare themselves for this, basically normal people were discouraged from wearing face masks because they want the NHS to have access to them. So they asked people to not wear them, just to keep the distance, which is a 2-meter rule. So at that time, only the grocery stores were open. So you could go to the grocery store, but just keep the 2-meter distance. There were large queues outside the grocery stores. So the only thing really was implemented was the social distancing measure. People were discouraged to wear face masks at that stage because they didn't want basically the country to fall short of face masks, because the health service was actually short of the equipment which they need for their safety. And even in that case, people who work in the health service have said that at times they couldn't use the personal protection equipment because there weren't many available. So only those people used them who actually were at high risk. So that's been an issue, I would say. And same again in Pakistan as well. The government couldn't keep the economy closed forever. So they opened the economy, and then they just said to follow the social distancing rule. But again, people have actually not followed. As soon as shops open, people just ran to the shops. And yeah, it's just been a mess after that, because people have not really followed the rules. And that's the problem. One thing I would say what the UK government has done really well in terms of the economy is that they have this job retention scheme. For example, if anyone working part-time, anyone working full-time, if they cannot work for whatever reason, or the business has gone down, so there's no business basically going on, so they can't work because there's no clients, for example, they don't have to work, but the government will pay their 80% of their salary. which is a good initiative. So that meant that a lot of people didn't lose their jobs straight away because the government have said they'll pay until end of October. So end of like this month, they're still paying 80%, but then by the end of October, it'll be down to 60, and then it just disappears. So the government has tried saving jobs like this. That's one thing which they've done very well. And so if you work in a part-time job as well, you get paid 80% of what you would have earned on average a month. So a lot of students are eligible for that as well, who work and go to university to study. And then there's also been grants for businesses. They've been given grants, they've given loans to make sure that they can survive the next 3 to 6 months. People who have businesses like small sole traders, for example, they've been able to get 80% of their profits from like 12 months. So there have been financial initiatives to make sure that people can actually survive. So that's been a positive effect of it, because the country has been in lockdown for over 2 months. So people wouldn't be able to survive if they lose their jobs. So that's what they've done, which is a positive thing, and probably one of the best in the world, I think, in that terms, because a lot of countries, I'm not too sure, but a lot of countries doesn't have this kind of thing where you get 80% of your salary paid by the government. So I think that's something very positive, and that's something which has been applauded. But other than that, in terms of the rules, everything else, it's not gone that well, and government has been criticized. Even now, they're getting criticized. So we'll have to see how it goes, how bad it makes a difference in the end. We'll have to see in the next few months how it affects the country itself.
Okay. You made a statement where you said the government didn't prepare themselves. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so basically what happened was the government weren't prepared for a COVID-19 kind of situation. So they thought that it would be more like a flu rather than SARS, which was, I think, 15 years back, or 16 years back. So a lot of Asian countries were prepared for it because they had experienced SARS. The UK hadn't experienced it. So they weren't prepared. So I was actually listening to one of the former health secretaries, and he said that we have prepared for a flu kind of situation like a few years ago, but we hadn't prepared for COVID-19 kind of situation. We thought it would be a flu, but it wasn't a flu. And that meant their equipment they had wasn't good enough for COVID-19. It was more good enough for flu. So they couldn't use the equipment they already had. Then they did not, they ordered some from Turkey, for example. When it came, it wasn't basically onto the safety standards. It wasn't meeting the safety standards. So it got basically the money wasted. So basically what they've done is they weren't prepared for COVID-19 situation. They were prepared where there's just a flu, like a swine flu or something like that. So they were prepared for that, but they weren't prepared for a COVID-19 situation. And that's how it went wrong. And the lockdown probably happened a bit late than it should have happened, because the cases were rising. There was a match between Liverpool and Atletico Madrid in March when the Spanish fans couldn't go to their stadium, but they could travel to England and watch a game. The government should have closed everything at that time, but they didn't. So that basically meant the cases were rising. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, true. I think many European countries didn't close their borders early in time, though, because Ukraine also didn't close their borders until, I think, March 15-ish. Thank you, though. Oscar? Or Tim,
Yes.
anybody?
Yes. Yeah, though the Czech Republic closed quite early, but it's also something that I would, for example, criticize to a certain point, that there was a lack of cooperation within the European Union, for example, that each country, even though of course there are Schengen agreements, etc., even though of course there was a state emergency declared, they should have cooperated before, because it was not something that came unexpected. It could be more expected before. They should have worked maybe more, but of course it's easy to criticize now, because in those specific moments, though, no one knew really what coronavirus is. It was a new virus. No one really knew how deadly it is. But what we can say now is that countries that took early steps even if not as large, even if not as harsh quarantines, etc., came out of the crisis, or came out, or are coming out of the crisis probably with less damaged economy. Because, for example, Britain, that locked down relatively late, will have to, or stayed closed in general, and the economy itself stayed closed for a longer time, which has the Republic closed earlier, reopened much earlier, and the economy might get better sooner. The problem, though, is that there are also countries which reacted really late, like US or Brazil, and this is a really bad outcome for them. And especially what I wanted to criticize a bit is that the biggest problem I think we still have is that there is no actor, no one taking the leading role in order to lead this global crisis together. Of course, the scientific community is amazing how they could cooperate and really fast, but politically the countries still remained very disengaged with each other. And I think this is, of course, as a reaction of the American presidency, which was not in America first, and it's remaining more in isolationist power. And so that would be one of the points, for example, which I think is important to criticize. But on the other hand, what was very interesting to see is that, as I said, there was a huge scientific community cooperation, and even churches, even religious institutions were saying, listen to the scientists and stay home in many cases. Not, of course, everyone. And this shows again that the scientific community during a pandemic, an epidemic, should be the one we will rely on first. So not like, for example, Bolsonaro or like Trump reacted to a certain point. Of course, it's not only Trump's fault, but to a certain point, of course it is. And so we should always listen what the scientists say, because it is, I think, the most objective, how to say, opinion we can have on we should all push for the continuation of international cooperation in this global task, and not only now in Corona crisis, but also in the future economic recession, which is likely to come. So we should be prepared to that. And the last point, which I would like to bring, is still that, of course, we should be careful on government surveillance, but we also should bring up now maybe the point that is slowly becoming a more realistic factor, which is the universal basic income, that some countries, because of the loss of jobs, are bringing something similar to universal basic income. As also Mohammed was saying, that the government was paying for the people that lost their jobs. The same was happening here in the Czech Republic. Many people got not the unfortunately, but the individual got similar to universal basic income. So this might be also something we should look how to deal these crises on.
Okay, I think I follow then, if I'm not mistaken. Or is there any other plan, Dèsirèe?
No, continue.
Perfect. So maybe having a chronological approach. I think that the German government reacted quickly. I think that we did well on increasing the capacities for testing. Obviously, it took a couple of days, maybe 1 or 2 weeks, but by then we had a quite consistent number of daily testing capacities. And I would also say that the financial support we are dealing with here from the governmental side has also been implemented quickly and has just been finally, so the final draft has been passed, I think about just a week ago, but the concept of what should be passed was already known to the public after a couple of weeks. The downside, if you ask me, is step one, our Corona app. It is secure when it came to the data protection component, that's all good. But instead of leaving it to the competition of the tech market, what the government did is that they just went for one big company, which is a former government-owned technology company, instead of leaving it to also the startup scene that they implemented themselves. And I think the prices they've paid for the app was way too high for what it is, in my opinion, my personal. But I'm not a tech specialist, so all I can see is what I see is the eventual price, the time it took them, and from that I think the Corona app took too long. Still, though, the data protection component is done well. I would also say that the regional approach we are having by now, that it's not a federal decision, but all of the 16 states can decide on their own, or even the regions, is something to be criticized. What I personally would have aimed for would have been in a Europe-wide approach. I understand that that leaves us with no flexibility for certain areas, but my understanding would be that you have a general set of rules when it came to the obligation to wear a mask, when it comes to the way we work on a vaccine or whatsoever, and that all of that has to be followed by one initial system. And that then at the same time, it is possible for individual governments to lock down certain areas where there is an increased spread of the virus. So I'm actually a bit disappointed to that end, that the response, the initiative we had was maximum on a federal level, sometimes even on a like state level, and worst case even on district or a regional level. So I think that only leads to confusion, and that's one of the problems. And I think the most crucial debate we are having here right now, or in fact we don't have, and that's the issue, is about how we want to end the lockdown situation. A couple of weeks ago, our Chancellor Merkel called any kind of debate about the topic of how we should stop, a perversion of the debate, which I found very odd personally. Because I believe from a constitutional standpoint, and that is also backed by a number of former constitutional judges, is that we should definitely start thinking about the way we affect people with the measures we're currently having, because right now we are affecting people regardless of their health status. So whatever kind of health situation you are having, you are obliged to follow the same rules. And that kind of an equal treatment is only justified if people are equal before the law. So what is debatable is whether people are equal before the law, or whether people who have a generally positive health status should be admitted to be freed from those obligations. The counter argument obviously is the capacity of the health system. But given the argument that, so far as I understood, the science behind the research that is done recently on the virus is that overall the number of cases that are that need health treatment within the hospitals or even intense care is quite low. So from my understanding, I see a good reason to open up for those groups that can survive the virus without any special treatment. And that at the same time, yet those groups that might be affected by the virus should have a clear legal standing when it comes to their working position, that they are allowed to stay at home, that what you've already said, Mohammed, when it comes to the UK, that there is some sort of a supplement financial support by the government we are having to some extent here as well. So that is known to Germany too. It is that you work on shortened hours, and the hours that fell away because of the virus are usually backed up by 60% by the government under certain, given that certain prerequisites are fulfilled. So I would definitely say that the question of how we want to leave this crisis is one we should debate. And when I think about the message that I would like to send to the youth is on the positive note, that there is a potential for radical societal change if needed. I think that is one of the things we've proved to ourselves, that whenever there is something we have to face as a society or even as planet Earth, there is a way to radically change the system we are living. It is not impossible. So I would align that with the whole climate action issue, that it is possible to radically change the world. But on a negative note, maybe I would have liked to see at the time of the maximum crisis, when the economy was locked down, people were staying at home, I thought that was the perfect timing to opt for a radical climate change, because To my understanding, it was the time where you can change the economical system with the least impact because the economy was already down. To give you a very simple example, what they did here in the state of Berlin is that during the lockdown, there were nearly no cars driving, obviously, because no one was moving around. So what they did is that parts, when you have, for example, a road with two lines in both directions, is that they cut it off one and made it a biking lane. So consequently, you have one lane left for cars and an additional lane for bikes. What they try to do by that is hindering new cars coming into the city, and thereby consequently changing the way people use public transport and the way they commute from point A to point B. So we had the option there at the peak time of the crisis to opt for a radical change of the economical system with a positive impact on climate. But to my understanding, we are already behind the point that we can do this now. So I would personally say that we lost a chance. There are certain measures taken on the European level when it comes to European Green Deal to use the recovery of the economic situation to finance, in particular, projects that have a positive impact on climate. Yet, this is still to be debated and is not yet passed by the law. And I would have said that we should have started way earlier to focus on green, green funding and green recovery. That would have been a chance. So that's maybe the positive and negative, not yet at the same time.
Thank you. Aidil?
Okay, thank you very much. About the policies that have been taken by Indonesian government, actually, the government already give out around 600 uh, 600 billions trillions. My bad, trillions, 600 trillions of its government money to support and recover from this COVID-19 situation. But by current view is the government try to give a lot of this fund into recover the economic aspect to help the small business to run again and also giving incentive to the entrepreneurs. But while looking from the portion, they gave a very little incentive for the health system itself. So from 600 trillions, it will take only like 80 trillions for the health, and the rest of it is for the economy. So I mean, in this current situation, I myself as a small entrepreneur, all of us, even if you give us money, we will keep it down because we cannot do any gamble in this current situation. So I do hope like the government will give more money to repair and do a lot of things in the health sector. The other aspect is on how the government give the fund into the society. Right now the government like to give like directly giving food like rice, like oil, like sugar and etc to the society. But in these cases I do believe if the government give out like direct cash, it will be a lot helpful because they still will buy the food anyway. But if the government do the buying, the money will go again to the big corporation. Okay, they will buy it from the big uh, entrepreneurs in Indonesia, and they will get all of the money. But how about the small shop owner, the small rice shop owner in the village? So I do believe it will be great if the government just give directly cash to the society, and it will be more transparent actually. Since if you give it food, since if you give it food, a mark up in the price, like they can do some deal in it. But if you give it like direct cash, you just can tell the society you have to receive like 400,000 rupees, and if they don't receive it, they will just report it. It's a lot transparent and easier to do. And in other aspect, for example, I want to take a look at the airport, for example. Like 2 days ago, not two, 4 days ago, I just fly to have a flight to my hometown in Makassar. and I do rapid test first. I got the health certificate with me, and I go to the airport. But I do believe that they do not really take a look in it. I mean, you can easily fake it, and they do not do anything to make sure it's original one. So it's also bring attention to me, and I do believe the government should not just talk it out in the media. They want to do good things, they want to do this and that, but really do it and in the field and directly to the people. Because like a month ago, the president of Indonesia, Mr. Joko Widodo, like show his anger in the media, like scold the all of the minister, like we're in the very serious condition, we're in a very hard times. Uh, don't do the ordinary things. You need to do the extraordinary things. But it turns out, yeah, not nothing much happened until now. So I do believe all of us already try the best, but some of us just get frustrated because it's very hard. Maybe for us, like me myself as college student, like Ali, Tim, Oscar, and Dèsirèe, maybe we're lucky enough because if in this condition we can still get enough food, like get food for our family. But in Indonesia, since there's so many people, so many lives, and so many people below the line of the poverty, the one who get money in daily basis, if they don't go to work that day, they cannot eat that day. So it's really
Yeah.
dangerous and very sad at the same time. So I just hope that the government give more and more direct cash to the society.
Um, so basically, all four of you brought up the issue of the government being able to provide funds for their citizens, right? Coming from what is considered a developing country, Sierra Leone, not like something like that is not able to be done. So, what's your take on that? Like government providing funds in more developed country and government providing funds in least developed country. Because Aidil was saying that in Indonesia, he'll rather the government give the money to the citizens instead of buying the goods. But in Sierra Leone, the government is buying the goods and handing it out to the citizens. So, on your take on that, like, can you maybe explain a little on what you meant by you prefer them giving the money instead?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
you can give
sure.
someone the money, but then maybe they won't use it for the purpose that it was deemed for to be used for.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much. Uh, Actually, since what I say before that there's a huge inequality in Indonesia, I do believe if the government give the society the money, they will use it anyway, and in any ways they use it, it will push the economy will to work again. They will use it to buy anything in the store, in the small shop, in anywhere. They will spend it back. So I do believe it will help a lot of small businessmen in there. But if they just buy the goods and handing the goods, uh I don't know, like, yeah, we should have like a positive image of the government, but I guess that's not how it works. And I do afraid that the money will go back to the big company who do the
Corporation.
export and import of the rice, since Indonesia, since the independence itself, like having like only 10, no 10%, like 2 or 3% of its wealth in a very small group of person. So by giving it money, it will help to push the economic back on its feet.
Can I react to that?
Yeah, 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 sure, sure, sure.
Yeah. No, that's exactly. If I understand it well, what Aidil is saying is that there should be something like a temporary during the crisis, universal basic income. Let's say that everyone would get a same certain amount of money, and not that the government would go and take, let's say, a big budget and focus only on certain aspect which would stimulate the economy. If I understand it, because if you give everyone, let's say, few hundreds euros or whatever, whatever it is, everyone will see the national problem which the government is facing. The government inequality is rising even more now because the poor cannot even have a job. And I think that's one of the problem, especially in developing countries, as you said, even in Sierra Leone. It's much harder for the governments to deal with these situations. As well, for example, another problem which I would see is like not only in developing countries, but even in Europe, authoritarian regimes are increasing their power, like Hungary. They abolished the parliament, for example. And that's another thing we have to be careful that it doesn't matter if a country is developed or not, but if there is an autocrat, let's say an authoritarian regime, or not really, but it's in the early stage even, they are using the corona crisis in order to increase their own power. And that's another, I think, problem which we are facing today. And not only outside, but also inside Europe.
Sure.
So,
Please, Ali, please.
okay, carry on.
No. You go.
I just want to add to your point. So, you've said that, of course, to give money, they need to be given money so they can spend money on. It's happened a lot. I'm from Pakistan, so a lot of things. What happened is that a lot of people who are on daily wages, for example, have been affected a lot by lockdown, for example, because there's no work to do. So what has happened is people who are more fortunate, who can afford to help the less fortunate people, they have basically tried to get food for a month. So like a pack of food, which doesn't cost a lot for like people who are in the top 5 to 10% of the population. So they have collected a lot of it and they have tried to give it to people who are less fortunate. But what's happened as well is because they've been getting from all different people, they've had so many of it that they've started reselling it to local shops. Because they get like 10 packs from 10 different people, for example, because everyone is trying to help certain people, but then those people, someone living in that area gets from 10 different people because they don't know they've already been given, because it's done not from the government, it's done personally by people. Because the government, again, it's difficult, as Oscar said about the basic universal income. In countries like Indonesia and Pakistan, it's difficult for government to pay every citizen a basic universal income because of how the economy is. So it can happen in developed nations, but it can't happen in developing countries. And we have to understand that. I get a lot of people from back home in Pakistan that they criticize the government, saying the government hasn't done enough. The government has done enough, but you can't expect the government to hold your hand and take you everywhere. You need to try yourself as well, and people have not followed the rules themselves. The government can't financially support everyone in the country. People who are fortunate enough to be able to help others should help others in developing countries, because I know it's a bit different. It sounds a bit different for developed nations, because you won't expect people to help other people because the difference in wealth is not that big. But in developing countries that I don't understand, Indonesia and Pakistan, you need support from people who are actually on the top 5 to 10% income bracket. So they need to help. And that has happened in terms of giving food. But again, I think money might be more useful, because the situation where I've said that there's one family and they got food from 10 different people with the same kind of food. They don't need food from 10 different people because they only need for a few months, so they can survive. So if they have more money, they can save it for the future. But because we don't know how it will be in the next 6 months, for example. For example, it goes back in 6 months again, in the same situation. You won't expect people to help all the time again. They don't have unlimited wealth to help out. So people can save for, times to come. Because at the moment, in any country in the world, you're not sure how long this situation will last, how long people will be out of jobs, because there's no demand. The businesses aren't working. You can't expect everyone to have a job. So I think maybe saving money for later is a good idea. And maybe if someone wants to help someone, it should be in form of money rather than food, because the food can help in the next couple of months, but it cannot help long-term 6 to 9 months. Because at the moment, the way things are, I don't think the situation will change this year at all, completely. So it will still be the new normal at this stage, where we might have local lockdowns, we might have full lockdown if the rate doesn't go down. So yeah, so I think I agree with universal income, but again, it can't happen from the government in countries like Sierra Leone, Pakistan, or India. I think it has to happen from people who are actually in the top 5 to 10% because there's wealth there. It's just they need to be more divided equally. So that's what needs to be done.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So
sure.
COVID has greatly affected economies. Its impact, like the impact on wealth creation and job opportunities, has been very overwhelming. And again, a great portion of the population in Africa and other developing countries like Asia, Latin American, and the Caribbean eke out their living on a day-to-day basis, as we have spoken about previously. So, what should the government do to strike a balance between like the reality and the application of measures to contain the pandemic? Because they can put it on paper, but executing it can sometimes be a big issue, especially for those of us that come from developing countries, unlike those from well-developed countries. Anybody? Aidil?
Okay, sure. Actually, I want to elaborate more a little bit about what already happened in Indonesia. At first, the government have a program to give uh, training to its society. So they will spend like 3.6 million of rupees, which is 1 million from those 3.6 million is for the training fee. The training is there to help people to get job, and the rest 2.6 million as a subsidy, as a fund for the society if they finish the training. But about a month ago, this program is temporarily stopped because the people protest like it's no use the government give work training for the people because no one open any job opportunity right now. And what I mean by the government should give more cash if in this 1 million spare for the training, they just need to spend it more to the incentive, to the subsidy, to as a cash to the society. And what I do believe we can do as the youth to help the government is by, yeah, there's a lot of way. It's really debatable, but for myself, what I see, since my background is also as an activist, I do protest a lot in the street and etc. I mean, in the news, like the government always try to spin off the news. I mean, if we try to fight to criticize on how the government spend its money, they will say we need to focus on how helping people's life, and they do not really elaborate to what we do protest. So lately, I see in the student movement, for example, they already go back to the street. But yeah, earlier someone also mentioned it about the protest, but in Indonesia it happened too, like people start to back on the street protesting with some kind of social distancing, which is, I do believe, not working, but they still do it anyway. But I get the point, they want to protest. So in these hard times, even we got a lot of pressure, we still need to see things clearly. And also by doing this kind of initiative, we can do a lot of uh, exchanging information, like what Oscar Ali team do, Dèsirèe do. Like maybe I have things on my mind, but it's only from my narrow perspective, saying what happening in Asia. When we compare it, what happened in Pakistan, what happened in UK, what happened in other country, yeah, we can see what's work and what's not working, and we can learn from each other.
Thank you. Um, Interesting input, actually. So would anyone like to put in anything with regards to the question that was put out?
Can you repeat the question again just for a second, just to
Okay. What should governments do to strike a balance between the reality and the application of measures to contain the pandemic? For those that, because
Yeah.
okay, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. So yeah, so what I would suggest is, I think there's a lot the government can do, but we have to understand the government is in a very difficult situation in any country in the world, not just developed countries. Um, like we have this in the UK, we have this job retention scheme. You can't expect that to last forever, for example. You can't expect that to be there forever. And the Chancellor of Exchequer has said that it won't be there forever because we can't keep supporting businesses forever like that. So we have to come out in some way. Um, what I would say is if people actually follow the basic rules, which is like a 2 meter rule or 1 meter rule, what it is, they need to follow that to make sure that the level of infection stays down. Because a lot of reasons why infection has gone up is because people are actually not following the rules. The government is in a different situation because they need to strike the right balance between closing the economy and opening the economy as well. They need to make sure that the public health is in right hands, but they also have to make sure that the economy is open because you can't keep the economy closed forever. Even with the few months of lockdown, we've seen most countries have seen worse, economic growth since even the 2009 financial crisis, which was one of the worst to be seen. Even since then, it's been actually even worse hit. Like UK has actually been really badly hit compared to what it was in 2009 financial crisis as well. So I think what the government, of course, has done enough in terms of finances, I would say. But I think now what is important is people have to actually make sure they follow the rules strictly. In some countries, it's possible to enforce it. Like in China, we've seen it's a different kind of regime there, so they have managed to force it on the people. In other countries, we cannot do that. People have been saying in Pakistan, for example, that there should be strict lockdown. I don't understand the term strict lockdown because it doesn't mean the government will force you, hold your hand, and take you around, say, well, don't come out. You know what I mean? Like people have to take their own initiative. They can't just expect the government to have a police officer outside and ask them to not go out because people actually have to follow themselves rules because you can't expect the government to do everything. People have to take steps themselves as well. The normal population will have to make sure to come out of this situation. People will have to now step up as well. The government has tried, and we understand with the current situation, you can't expect the government to, for example, all this wasn't planned. It was just happened because the situation deteriorated really badly, and the government had to take steps really fast. It was something which none of the government would have expected it would go this bad. Even back in December, I didn't think it would be this bad, but it went this bad. It's because it just got out of hand. And the only way to, and what difference between this virus and previous, flus and viruses, people have gone into more of a developed mindset now. People travel a lot more now. People meet other people more now. There's a lot of traveling happening. And that's why it's spread so fast as well, because people have not followed the rules. So I think the government has done enough what they can do for now, but it's time for people to now step up and follow all the rules. In Pakistan, it's called SOPs, and they have to follow them to be able to, make sure that we get the right balance between the economy and making sure the public health is in a reasonable standard where it can be handled. Because at the moment, this would remain for a few months. We have to make sure that we follow the rules. Basically, that's what I would say at this stage. I wouldn't blame the government now because the government has done what they can. It's time for people to step up as well, and for us to make sure people understand that they need to actually make sure they follow the rules now, because they have not been doing that recently. Since everything is open now, they don't follow any social distancing. It's difficult, I understand, but I think people will need to be thinking about should they go out if they don't have to. So that's something which I think the people have to do now. The government has set the standards. People have to follow it now.
Okay, thank you. We have one question here where someone says, what can we do to help the government and society to make the new normal successful? Should I repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Yes.
What can we do to help the government and society to make the new normal successful?
Yeah.
Maybe I can start there. I think the initial question is whether the new normal should be the new norm in the long run and what we define as the new normal. I think in the very first place, we all agree that the mask situation is not permanently, at least to my hope. Once there is a vaccine, and I think that's the overarching idea of the whole thing, and consequently with the vaccine, we can secure that the health system and the public sector in that segment is not run over by cases. I think that's the time when we can lift what we now call the new normal. Until that point, so the intermediary time frame, I would say that the most important part for us is to make it understandable. I think Oscar said at a very early place in this talk that it's important for people to back up the rules by science. And so consequently, when you look at the newly made research in that field, for example, there is a strong indicator that the herd immune that was, for example, the concept that Sweden used from the very first place is not working as a whole. But at the same time, what is indicated by the research is that it is possible for most of those cases to run without any severe consequences. So when we back those two up, let's see what's the consequence there. But to me personally, it is that we should lift for the healthy groups of the society. But whatever steps we are taking, regardless of the road we are approaching, it is important to back up the steps by science. I think our Chancellor Merkel, being a coming from the field of science herself, let's put it this way, is one who's using this argument, but since she gave the responsibility to the states, she's not speaking with that clear voice any longer. And we currently have the presidency of the Council of the European Union, which is now her key topic, where they also tackle Corona. So to come back to the initial question, I'd say that for what we call now the new normal, as within the intermediary period until we have a vaccine, it's important that we back every measure up by science. And maybe we add on that one is the constitutional component. At least for me, being a young lawyer, it is important to think about the consequences we have on the constitutional rights. We are at this point, let's say, just bifurcating or shortening the way they were originally. And so I'd say that we should always keep that component in mind. That's also what I thought is the most important aspect of the debate when we think about, apart from science, obviously, when we think about the way we can lift the lockdown again, is that we keep in mind that currently the situation we're having is a severe breach of several constitutional rights. Once we come across the point that we have a new vaccine, I think there is what we call the new normal. To me personally, is that we use the crisis, as I've said, for a lot of green funding. And I would say that that is the most crucial part then there, is that when we think about how we want to live after crisis, is that we also think about then the long run again, and then make people understand why it is important to use that crisis here, the funding that the economy needs to eventually tackle the overarching and more crucial goal of climate change we're facing.
Anybody want to add on to his point? No, that's fine. Okay. I have a question that I would like to ask. So, from the start of the lockdown situation that was implemented in many countries, I would go on social media, maybe on like Instagram and Twitter, and you'd hear about people committing suicide due to the fact that they've been locked in and been isolated for so long. It happened more in like the US and the UK. And I'd like to know if that's the situation in like Czech or Indonesia or Germany. Because like it's not heard of in Sierra Leone. So there aren't any cases that I can compare maybe to Sierra Leone and to other countries with regards to that. So I'd like to know about like in other countries.
I think I can respond to that one as well, which is that I think we, at least in the first stage of the Corona crisis, we neglected the psychological component of the COVID crisis, which to my understanding is totally logical, because obviously the first thing we thought about is the physical health of everyone in the respective country. But the more we are rushing into the crisis and the lockdown attached to it, I think the more it became clear to everyone that it has a severe impact to do so much home office, to stay so much indoors, and obviously that is attached to a psychological component. What I know, and that's the only study I can refer to right now, is that they recently did research on the psychological health of children in the country, which overall decreased according to the poll they've had there. I couldn't tell too much about the details, but the overall trend is that the coronavirus is negatively impacting the psychological health of children in the country. I couldn't really tell about death or suicide rates. So that's something maybe the others can touch upon.
Yeah, I don't know how many suicides there were, neither in Italy or the Czech Republic. I didn't hear about it, but I believe it might have gone up because, as Tim was saying, there was a negative psychological effect on people, of course, because they're staying home. And as Tim was saying about the kids as well, that's also very important to bring the question whether do we actually want the school to remain more and more online or not? Because, for example, Cambridge announced that until September 2021, they will not have in-class courses. And that's, of course, university is a bit different than for kids like normal schools, but still, how do we want the education to look like? Because in my experience, the best courses, the best classes were always where the student can get involved in the base in class. And online, of course, it's limited. So that's also to bring up. I hope you heard me, because it's telling me that the connection is unstable, but hopefully you heard everything.
Yeah, I want to elaborate a little bit about the point from Oscar about the education, and also what you ask about the suicidal rate. Same with me. I don't know about the exact number about the suicide in Indonesia, but what I do know, I just recently saw on the news, like in the capital city, like in Jakarta, the criminality rate is increasing, like around 19%, if I'm not mistaken. Since people get frustrated, they don't know how to get food, they don't know how to get money, and I guess that push people to do something outside their normal mind. So the criminality rate is very high. And me myself, I almost get robbed like 2 weeks ago when I playing my phone on the motorcycle ride, while I'm sitting behind, I'm using my phone, and someone tried to grab it, but fortunately it just fell down and the robber go away. But yeah, it happens 2 times actually, but the first one actually like 2 or 3 months ago. But what I do realize, like, it's getting harder and harder in the street. So there's a lot of psychological problem too. And about the education, this is one of the interesting point what happening right now in Indonesia. I don't know if it also happen in other country. Like the college student do a lot of protest actually to their university. They demand to decrease the cost they need to pay in each semester to the university. Almost all big university have this kind of demonstration because the student think that the university do not pay anything for the maintenance, for the electricity, for the water, and etc. And so the university student think that the uni got a lot more money on it, and also from the college student perspective, it's getting harder for their parents to get money, so they keep pushing their university. Even at the biggest one in Indonesia is University of Indonesia, the protest still keep running like in the social media and etc. and get followed by other university. But I don't know if this kind of things happen in abroad. That's it.
Oh,
Well, for
I haven't heard of
example, we were, yeah, for example, we back in our university were having discussions with the professors that were becoming skeptical of the future, how university will look like, because if there will be the best professor of a certain course in Cambridge that will have online courses, thousands and thousands of people can join there. And then they ask, oh, but what about these professors that are teaching here in the university have a job at all? So that's also another thing to see as it is.
Thank you. Lastly, anyone want to input? Because I think I heard someone trying to say. Fine.
I can add if you want.
Oh yeah, sure, please. Thank you.
So yes, so I've experienced that myself. Like doing a master's and it's gone all remote now through online classes, for example. I've actually not enjoyed them. I think they've handled it really well in terms of how it's been done, but I've not enjoyed it personally. So I hope that's not the future. But what I see is in the future we might see more online courses, more online undergraduate and master's courses, and which means that a lot of people would not have to travel to the country. So, for example, Cambridge, I think with Cambridge, it's the lectures who are not going to be done like in person, but they might have small group sessions because they only have a few students per small group session. Because in the UK, it's like you have a lecture and you have a small group session. So I think in Cambridge, they will have the small group sessions, but they won't have lectures, which you have around 200 to 300 people in a lecture. So that might change. We might not have large lecture theaters now if this situation changes. Again, Tim was talking about the vaccination. There has been reports where there's a chance we might never get a vaccination, so we have to be prepared for that situation as well. We can't just expect a vaccination to arrive from anywhere because at first it was said it might take 18 months, but again, there are reports that there might never be a vaccination because we don't know exactly if there will be something successful because they have to try first before they can make it public. So there's a risk. So we might have to live with new normal for a lot more years. But then again, historically, we've seen, when SARS and the Spanish flu back in 1918, 20, that disappeared. So worst case scenario, if there's no vaccination, I feel that we might see this just disappear from the face of the earth. That's possible because it happened with SARS, for example. It happened with Spanish flu back in the early 1989, 20s. So I think we need to be, at the moment, we might have to go with the new normal for the next few years. So the education might all be remote, which I'm not enjoying personally myself, but I think we might have to see that as a future now at the moment from now on. My course will be back in person in September if things don't go bad, which is a good thing. But a lot of universities in the UK, for example, have said that they will try not to have like large lectures in September. They don't know when they will be back fully. So yeah, it's a very difficult situation at the moment, I would say. And the education industry has been affected as well.
Yeah. As I'm about
the what?
Sorry?
Oh no, sorry, I heard something that didn't stuff. You can go ahead.
Okay. I was just about to say goodbye because I have another meeting already, in fact, a minute ago. So thanks for being here, and I hope you continue your debate and see you at some point again.
Thank you. Thank you very much,
Tim.
Thank you very much.
Tim.
Okay,
Bye.
Tim.
We have a couple more questions here. The first one being, what can we do to help the government? And sorry, no, I've already answered that one. The question being, which one is more important, the health, the people, or the economy? In my point of view, based on what I've been seeing with countries opening up, even though there's no like cure or there's no possibility of it being safe for people to go out, I think to some extent the economy is more important than the people when it comes to like the government and how they view everything. But what would you guys like to ask about?
It's kind of a tricky question.
It is, yeah.
It's like a riddle.
Well, based
You want
on
to go ahead?
how the openings have been put in place and how like the measures that aren't being followed by the people, it seems like the economy plays an important role in this because the main reason for the opening is because the we're basically experiencing some form of a recession. But that's what I think so, because many countries are opening up even though it's not safe or even though it's not the ideal decision to make at this point in time.
It's because you'll have to open up at some point. You can't, as I've been saying throughout, you can't close forever. You need to open at some point. At some point, in some countries, for example, developing countries like Pakistan, for example, I would say there are people dying because they don't have enough food on the table, for example. So we have to think like that as well, that COVID actually only has about 2 to 3% death rate. It's not, you can catch it really fast, but it's not that deadly compared to SARS like 15, 20 years back when it was, I think it was 10% death rate. So at some point you have to open up. People do catch it and do get healthy. So we have to accept that as well. Yes, we've had deaths, like in Italy, for example, there were more people, older people, and that's the reason the death rate is so high. I think same in the UK as well. But in some countries like Germany, for example, it's been controllable. It's not been that bad. So the governments have to take steps to open the economy because you can't just keep it closed because the moment we are there are reports that we might have a recession which is as bad as the Great Depression back in just after the World War One, and which was really bad for over 10 years. So if we get into that kind of situation, there might be people dying just because of psychological reasons, because they don't have jobs, or they might actually be dying because they don't have enough food on the table. So we have to be careful when we open and close. Of course, I think the best way to do is to have local lockdowns saying, okay, so they've closed Leicester, for example, now for 2 weeks and see how it goes. If it goes down, they'll open it up again. So in that way, it will just be like temporary lockdowns and not permanent lockdowns because you can't keep the economy closed forever. So the governments have had to take a risk, here as well. Even though the cases were still high, they've had to open restaurants, for example, because people work in restaurants, people own restaurants, and they can't keep closed forever. So they've had to open them with proper rules to follow. Again, it's up to the people how they follow them. If they follow them properly, I think we can get out of it. The reason the cases have gone up is because people have actually not followed the rules, and that's how things have gone worse. But I would support the government here, saying that they have had to take a risk because you can't just keep it closed forever. So they've had to take a risk. It's a calculated risk, but again, with this kind of situation, you don't know how it would go. We will, here in the UK, we'll find out in the next 2-3 weeks how things have gone. There have been local lockdowns, and they're saying that there might be some other places in the UK which might have a local lockdown. So we'll just need to see in the next few weeks how it affects. But the government have had to take steps, and they have. And I hope that things just improve, not go backwards, because at the moment, we don't know what to expect with this.
Anybody would
Okay.
like to input to that?
Okay. In my opinion, I guess there's I do forget which president who said that they know how to bring back the economy to life, but they cannot bring a dead man back to
Yeah.
life. It's
If I
it's
can,
What? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
I hear you.
yeah, but that's true. But actually, like what Ali said, like it 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 it, it, it works like in both way. Like we need to keep the economy up so it can save people's life, and we need to keep people healthy to keep the economy in balance. But in my opinion, and what happening in Indonesia right now, they say both of it matters, but what the government do in reality seems like doesn't show that kind of priority. Since like I say before, like 600 trillions of the fund they use on like 85 trillion for health sector, and the rest is for the economy stimulus and etc. But uh, I do hope like in the future, like the government can keep up this kind of good work, but also myself, I get really confused about where this going to go. Uh, I think that's what I want to add to this point. Maybe Oscar can add something up.
Yeah, what I wanted to add is that probably we understood that closing the economy, locking down everything as we did before might not be a feasible action to do in the future, because we saw the negative consequences of this, and not only economical, of course. And what we should do, or what the governments should continue to do, that's what I think at least, is slowly reopening, of course, continuing the cooperation on the international level, not only of the scientific community, but of government sharing data on coronavirus. But of course, this again. And what else I wanted to say is that this situation that we are in now can be, as Tim was saying before, again, a turning point where we can is need to be done very carefully. And what I'm referring to is again to the surveillance, as I was talking about earlier, that doing something in front is usually easier than going back. And that's important to keep in mind, that so once the government goes into a position of power, it's harder to, of course, diminish it. So that's also to remind. That's
So anybody else? We're finished?
Anyway, Dèsirèe, can you give us a little bit of picture what happening in Sierra Leone and in Ternopil, since I heard you in Ukraine?
Well, Ukraine so far, the restrictions have been like, put to a halt in a sense, because I remember at the start of the lockdown, they were saying, especially for foreign students, if they put down a new anywhere you go, you have to walk around with your identification and your documents. If not, you pay a fine. But now all of that has been lifted. Now people move around freely, restaurants are open, and everything seems like it's getting back to normal. But still, at the end of the day, the numbers are still increasing. And it's, but with the increase in numbers, it's not like people are dying per se. People are getting sick and getting healed, but it's just like the numbers keep increasing. It seems like we're in a second wave here. Sierra Leone, I can't really say much because they're still kind of in their first wave. It's now Sierra Leone has about 1,500 cases. So I think over time the numbers will increase a bit. But honestly, the government is trying their best. The doctors, the officials in Sierra Leone, they're really trying their best to control the situation. Considering we had Ebola back in 2014, 15, 16-ish, around that time period, with the help and the knowledge that we were able to gain from Ebola, we're kind of implementing it in the ways that we're doing stuff. Like recently, there were curfews set in place, like after 9 o'clock. I think it was 9 or 8. After 8 o'clock, you shouldn't be out in the streets or you should be home. But now all that has been lifted. People can move around now. And they're saying now the borders should be opening at the end of July. So I think we're seeing a little bit of progress, although slowly, but we're making a better, like, we've dealt with this coronavirus outbreak better than we did with Ebola. So Ebola kind of gave us an advantage, even though it was a bad thing to happen to any country. It did give us a little advantage on how we can better prepare ourselves for what came with coronavirus. And Ukraine, well, considering I live in a smaller city, the cases aren't as much as if I was living in a bigger city, like it maybe in Kyiv. Kyiv basically has some of the highest number of coronavirus outbreaks, actually. But, yeah. So we will be closing the discussion, and I would like for everyone to make a closing remark. Please, we can start with, let's start with Oscar. Hello, Oscar.
Oh yeah, I had my microphone off.
Okay, so someone else can start then while Oscar tries to get his internet back.
Aidil?
Ali, sure.
Aidil.
Ali, you look good, Ali.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Oscar, we can hear you.
Oscar.
Doesn't seem so. Okay, someone else.
Anybody?
I'll go on then.
Okay.
The disadvantage with online discussions, the biggest disadvantage with Corona being that everyone's internet seems to be acting up at one point during the discussion. So,
Okay, so I'll just finish it off. So what I would suggest is, at the start of the year, I was 31st of December, I was actually at the airport in Doha, flying back to UK from Pakistan. And I didn't think we will be in this situation, at that stage. I didn't think everything's going to be like this. I started working, I was doing a master's, and everything was going fine. And things have changed, especially for people who actually finished their undergrad degrees this year. They would be looking for jobs, or they're going to be doing masters, and everything's going to be going online, which is sad. And I know people who've had their graduation ceremonies either cancelled or postponed. It's affected them. But what I would suggest is, for the youth, that in the future, when they do go into the job market, I think they'll be in a better position because they can say, well, we survived a pandemic, so we are ready for anything because we can survive a pandemic. We can take care of anything. So what we need to do now is, the government has set the rules to follow. We need to just follow them, I think, as long as possible. We don't have to think about saying, okay, it's just until there's a vaccine, because we don't know when there'll be a vaccine or if there will be a vaccine. So we have to be sure that we follow the rules for now and just accept the way things are. Try not to travel long haul at the moment because I don't think it's safe, and just have necessary travel, and just go through the way things are at the moment. But again, if you follow the rules, I do feel that the way previous pandemics have gone through, they've disappeared completely. We do think, like you mentioned, Dèsirèe, you mentioned in Sierra Leone when experienced Ebola, so they were prepared in a way because they kind of got used to it. In some other countries like the UK or Pakistan, we've not had anything serious. So the governments weren't prepared for a pandemic, because the countries have not gone through it before. So a lot of Asian countries, for example, South Korea, they have been through SARS. China have been through SARS, so they know how it feels. They know how things are, how to handle a pandemic. So I think it's a learning experience, and we just need to make sure we follow all the rules, and we'll be fine in the future.
Thank you for that.
Resilience is very important.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm back. I'm sorry, I had some problem with the connection again.
It's okay. It's okay. We can hear
Okay.
it clearly now.
Perfect, perfect. So what I wanted to end up with was saying that people, of course, citizens should follow what the government says, considering that the government has the best knowledge from the scientific community. And according to that, they make decisions. So we all have to hope that they're making the correct decisions. And what more importantly is that governments all around the world, and they are doing it now perfectly, they should continue to collaborate, because this is not the only pandemic that I think, or many or epidemic that will come. There will be many more, and especially by continuing to deforest zones and areas in the Amazon or even in Indonesia. With that, any disease can jump on humans and quite easily. So we need to prepare and try to prevent other. Until now, we were not really prepared on to deal with them, but now with the knowledge we gained, hopefully it will be much better. And thank you. I wanted to thank still everyone for this debate. It was really great, and I hope we'll have many other to come.
You, Oscar, Aidil?
Okay. First, I want to say thank you very much. Also, and because of this pandemic, I just realized that we as human have so much limitation. I mean, at the first of this pandemic, I just thought like, okay, now somewhere in this world we'll find the cure soon, and everything will be good. But it turns out even all of the greatest scientists still need to work out in it. And at this point, we realize, wow, we still got a lot of a gray area in this world, and we still need to learn much. And actually, at the first of this pandemic, like a lot of Indonesia didn't take it seriously. Like they say, oh, we have a lot of pollution over here, so we will be uh, easy to fight the pandemic. We're going to get used to it. But it turns out it doesn't true. So I really hope that in the future, since Dèsirèe coming up with the issue about the suicide, which is really hit me, I just realized it and think, wow, that's a real case out there. So if you're watching this, anyone watching this, I just want to let you know, like all part of this, all countries in this world feel the same thing. We're in this together, but hopefully we can keep holding on, like keep empowering each other, sharing information, and don't trust everything you read on the media, because like my parents like reading, like I don't know if whether it's true or not, like they really get scared by this kind of hoax information and give us like panic attack. So maybe at one point we just need to look back on our lives and see what we can do and what we can do to help others, and just hope that what Oscar said, like I do believe the government tried their best. They have the best access to the scientific community, and yeah, let's just hope that the government tried best and the people want to follow the rules that already set up by the government. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been an extremely nice conversation and discussion, and I'm really happy to see the viewpoints and the point of views from all of you representing like different countries. And I think, we should do something like this again soon. But thank you guys. And I would like to close this off by saying that coronavirus is real. As some people say it isn't, it is real. And I think that we should just continue to be cautious in everything that we do and try at least to keep that 2-meter distance. But thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hold still.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Aidil, that you planned this as well. Thank
Yeah.
you for everything.